Your seats. We'll get the speaker series moving along. After having Mr. Dorsey here last month, we people got decided to take this month off. So, all right. So if you can get my slides up there, we'll go from there. All right. So we'll start with the next slide. All right. Upcoming events. This may take us the whole hour. We got a lot going on. Park Meadows Thursday night at Orvis is the Fly Fusion Tour, and we will be there. Scott will be leading it, and we're going to be selling raffle tickets. So there'll be some prizes donated by Orvis, and we'll see how much money we raise. But that's a great tour if you haven't been there. So that's Orvis Thursday night, 4 o'clock. I think the meetings are 6 to 7. 4 to 6 is hors d'oeuvres and probably beer. So, and raffle tickets. That's right. um, Jim and I are going to Montrose this weekend for the CTU rendezvous. For those that are familiar with CTUs, with TUs work, they had the Western Regional Rendezvous for TU last weekend. There'll be some announcements and what have you coming out from that. I do not know what was announced at this point at the TU rendezvous in Montana. And just a bit of a I'm pretty sure the EU Western Regional Rendezvous will be in Colorado next year. So Lake Lehigh this Friday. It's going to do some releases. Something came up. I'm not sure I fully understand what happened, but they had to school had to cancel for the classroom release. Okay. Saturday is Earth Day, so plan on snow. Every time we do that, it snows. So, but that's the city of Lakewood. Are we meeting at Stonehouse, Jim? And that's right by the Stonehouse. Yep. Yep. Thursday the 30th, Mark. Is Thursday the Lincoln Outings trip. Oh, yeah. See, if only the slides were proofed by people. Right. May 4th is a Zoom board meeting. Again, anybody that would like to join us is always welcome. We'll get that information out. Why don't you let us know what you've got going, Phil? Okay. Next, we have on the night, I've been asked to do a Fins and Cousins event in the park. Which is the South Coast of Oregon Theater, south of Oxford, right by South Platte. And I think we know that on my it's basically they're teaching kids how to fish, and they've got 100 zip codes. So there's a lot of that going on. When they ask for CCTU to show up to talk about fishing conservation and not going to talk about the condition of the plat and in fact, we also remember that. It's also and if everybody wants to join and welcome to the library. And then I have one other event, which is the Wildcat Spark Day. That's Wildcat Elementary School. Maker School, they're doing a Spark Day. Field day, STEM, and everything else mixed together. And that's for CCTU to do. That's the best one. CCTU and workers and team other. I haven't seen Justin yet. Maybe at least one or twice a year, we're going to be, if anybody else wants to go, and they can use the help. An all day event, 2 hours session in the morning, 2 hours session. 25 elementary school kids per session. That's all I got. That's your list. The Bighorn Peak is full. There's not many people going this year. They canceled one of the houses, so I think it's 6 for the Bighorn trip. So there's a conversation about do we want to do the Bighorn next year or maybe do something closer. So if anybody's got any ideas. Um, uh, Justin, hopefully he'll show up next week, next month, because he's a speaker. Um, on the 20th is River Ridge. Any comments, Jim? Or if you want to come, at 9 o'clock on the 20th at the parking lot for Waterton Canyon. The 22nd is Lake Lehigh again. We need to speak up with everybody about Lake Lehigh. We're starting to see many people show up, so that's something that we want to push to people. Go ahead. Either this Friday or the beginning of next month. So there's a chance that it may begin pushing them. They'll can fish. They'll be not the plant they put in Brewers and Timby was the first one to catch the 17.5 inch crude. But anyway, it should be good fishing certainly this month and next month. Okay. And then May 28th is the Moving Waters trip. Again, that's a Thursday, and that's most of the day. Next slide. Financial, yes.
Gala and Trout Fest. Gala and Trout. Gala has been moved to May 12th. Just thought that was
Okay.
Yeah. So as you know that the gala was scheduled from March 19th to April 12th. And the auction is still open and new things have been added. So if you've looked at it once, go back and look at it again because there are some really cool stuff. But, thank you for those who've been bidding a lot. We love it. And so the gala, I think there's still tickets available too.
We have a table of 10 for the gala. It is not full. There's a bunch of us that we're going to be at the table for 10 that now cannot make it because of the date change. So if you want to go to the gala and sit at our table, I need to know.
If anybody wants to come and be a volunteer, helping with setup and checking in, checking out, and that type of stuff, come see me. I can get your name and send you the link for the volunteer page. As you see, I'm in a wheelchair, so I will not be able to do setup with a broken leg. And as well as in June, I know June's not up on his calendar, but June 27th is Trout Fest at Forest Field. It's free. I think the time's from 12 to 5, but don't quote me. And we also need volunteers for that. You can see both Ray and I are wearing our volunteer t-shirts that are really cool that you get for being a volunteer. And we'll have many, many jobs to do at Trout Fest over a 2-day period of setup and Trout Fest itself and tear down.
All right. So the gala, of course, is Colorado Trout Unlimited. It's their gala, not for the chapter. And there's a lot of good prizes. Not prizes, but good items. All right. The financial update. You want to say anything?
And quite well, the reason our income was over budget, the main driver was the raffle that we had at Christmas, Christmas raffle.
The raffle at our big raffle, yeah, that we pull on in November. Yeah.
And then thing there and the budget, there was a different budget for the guild trail, and instead of $11,000, and so, and that's why he like budget stuff, because there was no budget. But we education and DNA were both developed. So it's turned out.
It was a good year financially for us. And Debbie's picked up all these duties to get this going. If you want to see details, let us know. Let me or Debbie know, and we can provide that. So, next slide. All right, here you go. Tonight's agenda. So, the next person to speak is Rick.
We're just gonna let everybody know that we got notified from Colorado Park and Wildlife that we're Colorado Park and Wildlife is giving us a grant this year called Fishing is Fun, and who doesn't agree with that? So this is a competitive grant that we have to go get, and they look at, is it a good project? Is it really benefiting somebody? And do you have the team that can get it done? And all of those came together, and they're going to give us $40,000 to finish the Gill Trail this year. And it's a big day, big year at the Gill Trail. We've got another 40 we're going to be spending, so it's going to be $80,000 at the Gill Trail this year. And just stay tuned for volunteer days. Come out later.
All right. Okay. Any other interest questions? Rudy? Where's Alan? It's my pleasure to introduce Rudy Trout. Rudy is a longtime friend, buddy, fishing buddy, drinking buddy. Was fullest contributor to our chapter over the years with custom made fly rods. In fact, one of his fly rods is the prime record rods that Rudy is going to describe. He was a long-time past president of Cherry Creek Animals. It's my pleasure to introduce him. He's going to be speaking on a small thing, something like that.
Thanks. Thanks everybody for letting me speak tonight. I'm a rod builder. My other life, I'm a rod builder. In my other life, I'm a gas compression engineer, which is kind of a esoteric field, which most people in this room may not know what that is. It's sometimes described as the technical or intellectual side of the oil field, though that's definitely up for debate. Fly fishing and fly rod building in particular have a lot of parallels with engineering. And one of the things I learned going through my paces in gas compression from age 16 all the way into engineering status today is that engineering for other people is no fun. There's a lot of constraints, a lot of variables, and real engineering is building things under budget that are sellable in the market, not building things perfectly so that they never fail. And so for people like me who think rigidly and antisocial and like to build things to perfection, uh, gas compression engineering is probably not the best thing for me to do. But in pursuit of things that uh, you don't have to compromise on, that you can make perfect as long as you're willing to put the time and energy into it. Rod building is the passion that I've taken upon myself to try and make things that are beautiful and functional. Uh, Unfortunately, one of the things that the oil field did to me is it ruined my body. And so the, I guess you'd say, the cost benefit analysis, uh, where I've had enough scotch to make my hands stop shaking and to help with my arthritis, by the time at that point, my eyes don't work anymore. And so that key component to doing intricate work with your hands, the hand-eye coordination equation, uh, is starting to get a little out of balance for me. So made a decision recently that I'm not going to build any more rods for sale or for donation because I just can't guarantee the quality anymore. The other part of that is that whereas I can guarantee the quality, it'll take me 5 times as long to build it. So people that are expecting rods from me right now, probably a 2-month lead time. But in any case, we'll to what goes into building a custom rod. If I can make this work, and we don't have a ton of time, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this stuff. What I would like to talk about, basically, that's all the stuff you need. But some of the things that people into trouble most frequently are the liquids that go into building a rod. What I'm talking about are the 2-part epoxies that are used for both the adhesive and the finish. And problem that people have, I'm going to turn it off, did I? Okay. So this is the mechanical part of it, the real seat in your grip. And I consider the guides and guide placement, uh, the wrapping of the thread and everything like that to be more important than this part. However, if you haven't done a good glue job with your liquids on your reel seat and it falls off while you're fishing, then it doesn't matter how beautiful your threads are. Your rod's toast and you're done for the day. We'll get to this a little bit later in more depth, but when you're mixing epoxies, every epoxy I know of is a 1-to-1 ratio. And they sell the CC syringes for this purpose, and they're like $1. There is no reason to eyeball this. If you're doing that, you're playing with fire. Man. What'll happen with bad ratios is either the adhesive will never set up or it'll dry so hard that it doesn't have any resilience. And when you're using a fly rod, but you can't feel it, there needs to be flexibility throughout the entire system. If that glue can't respond to the physics of the rod, then it's going to crack. And that's when your threaded barrel there falls off the end of your reel seat and you see your reel laying down the river. And that's happened to me. All the things that I discuss here have happened to me at one time or another. So it's all of this is important. So we're just going to talk about the reel seat for a second here. When you buy a reel seat kit, you're going to get that threaded barrel, the nut, it's the butt cap, that's the sleeve that's going to be in contact with your grip, and that is the hood that's going to cover the back reel foot. Those wood inserts fit in that threaded barrel. Now, those are highly polished surfaces. And if you've ever tried to glue any highly polished surfaces together, it's not a good bond. You need to get yourself a grip. So what I always do is, like in this section here where that threaded barrel is going to go, you take a die grinder, or you saw on the tools I had a Dremel tool. That's the most important thing for rod building, is you can dig yourself a nice perpendicular length trough going up that as a glue trap. Similarly, most of the die grinder kits you can get for a Dremel have like a little 1/8 carbide burr, and you can go inside that barrel and create that same channel. Now it's thin, so you can't get out of hand on it. But if you give yourself a nice variegated surface where that glue has a place to stick, then the idea of that thing coming off at the wrong time, you're basically defeating that. The other part of that is when you get that reel seat together, you're going to want to glue that to your wood inserts first, let it dry completely, 24 hours. Then you're going to install that on your blank. Then nut, cap, and the reel seat foot, the hood, make sure you do that in the right order. Because if you don't, and you glue that butt cap on, it's over. If anybody's ever worked with rod building adhesive, it is exceptionally strong. And when I've made mistakes like that and tried to pry off that butt cap, I had to use my Nip-X alligator pliers and basically destroyed a $100 reel seat. So if you do your epoxy right, it'll be that strong. And if you screw that up, you're out $100. So don't screw that up. Okay. The cork grip, basically, there's no reason to buy individual cork rings anymore. If you can buy the AAA best cork ring grips that they sell, and they won't be half the quality of a $20 finished the type you just buy from Mudhole, pre-assembled with the cutout for the reel seat. I keep on thinking I'm going to get lucky, but those cork rings cost like $1.25 each. So you need 16 of them for a threaded or for a grip, and you can buy a perfect one that looks AAA to me for basically the same cost, and you're not going to spend 2 hours making it either. So if you're looking to save time, do not try to make your own grip unless you want something really special. So after the speaker, after the meeting's over, if somebody wants to see me do a thread wrap, there's a lot of people haven't seen that before, and it's kind of interesting. Perfectly willing to show you how it's done. We're not going to spend a ton of time on that right now. But guides, let's just put it this way, it's the most important part of your rod as far as carrying load and throwing line. If you get your guide placement wrong or they're not attached properly, it's a nightmare. I mean, you can take $1,000 Sage blank, do all of that wrong, and now you might as well bought your rod at Walmart. So, and it's luckily for us, we don't have to figure all this out. There is so much data online for rod recipes, people that have thought about this and they've worked out the physics. So it's not hard to get this right. Now, one thing I do want to talk about is when you buy guides, you go to Mud Hole or Rod Builder Supply or something, the guides you're going to get are probably going to look something like that. And anybody's ever wrapped thread, trying to get thread to come up from the blank and grab that, what you end up having to do, if I had to build on this foot, I'd come up over the top, probably, you know, this is not the scale, of course, but I'd get up here high, give myself about 6 wraps, and then start pushing that thread back down towards the wrap. And that would be just to get that guide foot on. But the problem is when you do that, all the threads are going to be bunched up on the top and it's going to be separated on the bottom. And if you try to finish that as a professional, it's going to look like crap. And everybody's going to notice it immediately. Now, this is what, notice we got a smooth taper. That's going to be, if you've got 5,000th of an inch there above the blank, that's going to be a continuous wrap. You don't have to do anything silly with manipulating your thread to get it to go right. And you can just travel right up all the way to the end. Now that's a packed bay. Yes, sir. Yes. Yeah, I mean, when they're really bad, I'll use a Dremel and then I'll finish it with a 320 grit sandpaper. And I mean, that's just to smooth it out, take any hard burrs off. But the other thing you're doing, you put that swirl pattern in it, just like, you know, like if you're putting the reel seat on the rod, you've got that smooth surface. You want to create kind of a crosshatch in engine terms to give something for the glue to stick to. Similarly, we get that 320 grit swirl, and it helps that thread when it's sitting there. If it's totally smooth, you got a good chance it's going to want to slip down no matter how good your taper is. Yeah, that Dremel tool is great. It makes all of this immensely easy. This is another guide that's right and ready to go. These are my personal favorite. They're REC recoils, and they're made out of spring steel. Obviously, chemically treated, very, very hard. But what they do is you've got this tiny cross section on the blank. And so the amount of stretch you put on that, you know, your stress is at one point, but they're flexible. So the whole rod can flex, especially in the tip section where you have like a normal stake guide, which is rigid. You can feel the difference between having a spring steel coil as opposed to having a hard guide that doesn't have any flexibility. The only problem with those is because they are so flexible, you do one wrap and then you turn the rod around to do the next one, and you got to chase that other foot around because it's so flexible that you can move it. And once you get that second wrap in, you can't move that guide to adjust it because it springs back. And so your guide alignment when you're doing that, it's critical. You don't get it right on the first thread, you try to start the second one, and you're gonna have to struggle. And I've got a couple of those here. So the last thing we're going to talk about, and this is where people screw their rods up the most, is finishing. So I've done all of these things, and I've done them a lot of times. And you think I've learned my lesson. When I was in the oil field and I started building rods, essentially to save money initially, I bought my first Sage RPL in like 1988. I could not break clean. And if the dirt you get in your hands out there has to wear off, there's no soap that does it. And you wouldn't know it until you put your epoxy on. Well, epoxy doesn't stick to oil. And so what you end up with in your finish is a bunch of thumbprints and other places. I mean, you could see all the tracks where I touched the thread. And I mean, that was just when I was building rods with one thread color, whip it out, be done, put the finish on. Now imagine if you're doing that with 4 thread colors and you spend an hour on each one weaving it through, and now you've got that thumbprint on. You know, now is when the drinking starts. So it's the other thing, as tough as rod winding thread is, if you abuse it with sharp tools, or I've seen people use screwdrivers as a burnishing tool. You pick up tiny little frays. I mean, it looks like CDC hairs. I'm talking to threads. If you let that go, I mean, you can burn it off, of course, but it's still going to leave a little nub, a black spot underneath the finish if you do that. The best way to do it is use a plastic burnishing tool. And I've got one. Basically, you can use a toothbrush too. Works just as good. But this is the sharpest thing you ever want to use on threads. And even with this, if you put too much pressure on it, you'll start to dig up those individual fibers in the thread, and you'll have to burn them off or start over. Most important part of threads, color preserver. So it's also called thread sealer. And the reason you use this, there's two types of thread in the world. There's a nylon, which if you put your finish directly on the nylon, it's going to change the color of the thread. It's going to become darker, coloring going to jump out. And so originally, that's what color preserver was for. The more important facet about this is when you apply color preserver to any kind of thread, it pushes the air out. Because the enemy of good looking threads and finish is air bubbles that escape into the epoxy that you can't get rid of. And if you use this stuff, it's not to say that you won't have some air bubbles, but they'll be manageable. If you don't use this stuff, you'll have a battlefield of marks in your thread and your finish that just looks bad, put it that way. So like I said before, the plastic syringes that come, you can buy epoxy for like kit costs $13. It comes with the plastic syringes. There is no reason to get this wrong. It's I used to do this when I was a kid. You know, you get the plastic cups that are marked in CCs. And I mean, maybe you get the first one up to 5 CCs, but then when you're putting part B in there, it's just a little bit over. And so then you add a little bit more part A, and now you don't know where the hell you're at. And then you apply it, and your thread, uh, your epoxy never dries. You have a rod sticky forever. And again, I mean, it's your choice whether you choose to try to fix that rod. The better idea is just to throw the goddamn thing away. So, uh, don't use a stick to stir. A lot of, when you buy these kits, they'll come with the plastic stirring sticks. The better way to do this so that you're not introducing air into it is to just squirt the epoxy out of the syringes directly into your mixing cup and then put it in the rotating mixing bowl. The mud hole's down for like $18, and that will save you. I mean, I would pay 10 times for that thing because if you don't use it and you end up with all the crap in the thread because you didn't mix properly, then we can throw it all away or we can start over. Other things here, don't ever put epoxy on your rod where your time flies, especially when you're doing fine nymphs and stuff like that, with CDC and other stuff that's going to tend to float in the air. It will find your epoxy, I guarantee it. Last thing, you're going to want to have a way to spin this rod after you put epoxy on. It's called a drying lathe. You can get the whole set from Mud Hole or Get Bit for, I don't know, it's like $50 for the drying motor. Don't abandon it or you'll that. Now that is the same rod, same model rod that's over there. And what happened is my kid turned off the light switch on the basement wall when the thing had been on there for like 3 hours. And I didn't think anything of it. I came back and I found that the epoxy was set up, and you may think that you can just suck that part of the epoxy off with a razor blade and go about the business. It doesn't work. What you end up having to do is you can put it in your winding lathe and use sandpaper, just microscopically, carefully, try to knock that down. But what ends up happening is that. And I ended up throwing that blank away. $350 down the drain. And that's at wholesale cost. So, I mean, that's like a $500 blank that I just decided to throw away. Yes, sir. That was Joe, and it wasn't my fault. It was not his fault because I didn't tell him. So I got good and mad about it. But yeah, I mean, that's the consequences of bad epoxy and what you have to do about it if you want to fix it. Now, I mean, the way it was, that rod would have fished fine, but I've got a little personal pride where I don't want a rod that looks like that in my arsenal. So I don't know. Probably a lot of this is boring. Is anybody asleep yet? We're trying to get an idea of how many people would be interested in doing a building workshop. Uh, like I said, I'm not building rods for money anymore because my hands and my eyes don't work well anymore. What I do have to offer is knowledge, and I'm willing to share that. Uh, and if people would like to get into a rod building workshop, I still have all of my wholesale discounts with Mudhole and GetBit, some of these other companies and I'm not charging anything for it. I mean, we would buy these rod building kits together. So you got something to start with at my wholesale price, which is 40% off. And then we can build these things together. And if people have an interest in doing that, I'm glad to help.
You and I get and see what people appreciate it.
Cool. All right. That's all I got. I know I didn't.
Speaker is the Stephen Scholarship Fund. The company has been sponsoring for 10 years. Many really know Steve Ballard, who was the president of the chapter for the 1980s, and continued to be active in the chapter after its passing. We established a scholarship fund and Colorado State University, the Lower School of Natural Resources, and we've been enabling the $3,000 scholarships per year to verify students who are looking to get their Master's in Science. If uh, about professions, fame, just being aware of value of the students who are applying. And Helen Acosta was chosen this year. She's done some great work that she's going to speak with you. Um, from Southern California, she was very impressed and also very schooled. Spent an interest in fisheries and conservation. She earned a project award at Cal Poly with her local Colorado to work as a fisheries technician with those forces. Proved of strong mentorship within the agency, Helen decided to pursue the Master's of Science at Colorado State University in 2024. Her research focuses on fish ecology and freshwater marine system. First, presented with the first chapter of a graduate work analyzing belly plant survival, which released during the fall in 2024 due to high flow rates and Trout. To the question.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you for that nice introduction, Alan. I'm Helen Acosta, and today I will be talking about survival analysis of adult brown trout in flow-regulated Blue River by using a mark recapture method. So across the United States, less than 1% of rivers remain designated as free-flowing without human-made barriers. Dams and flow regulation implemented for hydropower, irrigation, and flood control have substantially altered natural flow regimes. As a consequence, fish that have naturally evolved their life history processes to this now have to adapt in order to maintain their reproductive success. Brown trout are an example of such species which depend on stable, cool, and well oxygenated conditions. However, they persist in several flow-regulated systems, making them valuable to analyze as a species. By examining brown trout survival and recapture response in their environment, we can gain insight into how flow regulation shapes population dynamics and inform future flow decisions. So to get started, this research takes place along the Lower Blue River, which is near the town of Kremling in north central Colorado. Blue River spans about 105 kilometers from the main stem down to its confluence with the Colorado River. And it has two hydropower dams that operate along the Blue, that being first the Green Mountain Dam, which was constructed in 1943, and then the Dillon Dam constructed in 1963. So for reference, anything below the Green Mountain Dam is considered the Lower Blue River, which is where our focus will be at. So to better understand the magnitude and impact of flow regulation in the Lower Blue River, the free-flowing Blue River is used as a nearby reference site due to hydrograph similarities with the pre-dam conditions of the Blue. Here we can see that those similarities, as the Blue River used to have a characteristic hydrograph driven by snow melt, like the Eagle River from 1948. Compared to historical data, we can see that both hydrographs no longer share similarities in their flow regime. Blue River now follows a pattern characteristic of hydropeaking flows, reflecting flow regulation in order to meet water and energy demands. So as a result of this in our study system, we see unusually low stable flows at the start of summer, unlike Eagle, which still reflects that spring runoff. Higher flows that otherwise would have occurred in the spring to early summer are now delayed in the Lower Blue River to mid-July, continues to fluctuate into the fall partially. And in the winter to early spring, flows are slightly elevated with some peaking still going on, but they're more stable compared to other months. However, these combined seasonal alterations in flow patterns are likely to affect important life history cues and survival outcome of brown trout, particularly during periods of extrinsic stress such as limited food availability, fluctuating temperatures, and habitat availability. So in the system, I focused on two primary research objectives. First, was to determine whether the survival outcome of adult brown trout would differ in the summer versus winter. And secondly, to evaluate the extent energy reserves and body condition is associated with brown trout survival probabilities. To begin, this study was conducted from 2021 through 2025, with biannual sampling occurring in the spring and fall seasons. Sampling took place across 5 sites, spanning about 4 kilometers together total. And adult trout population monitoring was conducted using an electrofishing tote barge, as seen in this picture, in the middle of the channel. And during these sampling events, fish metrics consistently collected entailed of fish length, so that's total length and fork length in millimeters, weight in grams, and energy in trout. Energy content was estimated as the percentage of lipid content in each fish by using a Distill model 692 fish fat meter. And basically this device uses a microstrip sensor in order to measure the ratio of fat to water content through direct contact of the fish's skin. And then prior to release, all fish were either scanned or freshly pit tagged for the remainder of the study. So we have a total of 10 sampling occasions from 2021 to 2025. And by analyzing pit tag data, we can observe and quantify fish that were newly captured or recaptured during this time. I would also like to point out that overall fish capture in certain occasion reflects times of sampling difficulties with high flows, such as fall 2021 and spring 2024, which both had a discharge slightly over 400 CFS, which makes sampling not ideal to say the least. And spring 2024 is where I almost got wiped out. It was fun. But in contrast, you can see in 2021, there's a very low discharge of CFS, 80 CFS at that sampling occasion. So this actually reflects that more than ideal sampling occasion or sampling. So here's a length frequency distribution of all brown trout captured across all sampling events. Brown trout in our study ranged from around 4 inches to nearly 28 inches and had an average of around 13 inches. For analysis, we focused on individuals that were greater than 9 inches total length, and that's indicated by the red dotted line. And that's because fish that were smaller than that, we couldn't get a fat content measurement out of them, so we excluded them. As part of initial data exploration, lipid content across all sampling periods was standardized to make fair comparisons. So instead of looking at just raw fat values here, we're looking at whether a fish has more or less fat than the average fish at that sampling occasion, which you can see by the red dotted line. This revealed a clear seasonal pattern in brown trout energy reserves, with the spring showing lower lipid content than the fall. These seasonal differences reflect natural fluctuations that we would anticipate in energy content in response to environmental conditions or feeding opportunities as well. So based on what we know about the life history of brown trout and also the flow regime of the Lower Blue River, I developed two hypotheses. The first predicted that winter survival would be lower due to limited food availability and harsher conditions. And secondly, fish with higher energy content and better body condition would have increased survival probabilities in both the summer and winter seasons. In order to address these two my objectives and my hypotheses, I used a Cormack-Jolly-Sieber model, CJS model, which was implemented to analyze the survival and recapture probabilities of brown trout using the mark recapture data from the ranch. So similar to microchips, tags allow us to track individuals by having a unique ID assigned to each fish. Therefore, we could track that fish in future sampling events. So an obvious challenge with this sampling and this data is what happens if we don't find that fish? We don't consistently see it. So the model helps us overcome this uncertainty by incorporating fish capture histories. And that will give us a more accurate survival estimate. So as a quick visual of these fish capture histories, I'll be using two actual fish from our study that were marked and recaptured across 7 sampling occasions from spring 2021 to spring 2024. Here we have fish BB3C, which was observed over 2 years, and fish BB59 was observed nearly all the sampling events in this study period. So from my field observations, we can then build a record of each fish, showing whether we saw it or not. So 1 means the fish was captured, and 0 means we didn't see it. So what we're really interested in was seeing what happened between those sampling events. So we want to see whether the fish survived or not. Since we don't observe the fish continuously, we use a model to estimate the probability that a fish survived between the sampling periods, as well as the chance we would catch it at these sampling events. And in our study, those in-between periods line up just with winter and summer seasons. So in the model, I use a statistical method to estimate how likely fish are to survive based on their lipid content, as see here, size, TL, and body condition, BC there. And then recapture was based off of flow and the size of fish. Fish body condition was calculated and determined using relative weight, which we derived from length-weight relationships. And this helps us to measure the plumpness of fish. So the fish that are heavier and fattier, we designate as in better condition in this study. And finally, because the time between sampling occasions wasn't always consistent, we standardized the sampling interval to 183 days in the model. So, using the model, I first estimated how likely fish were to survive between each sampling period, and are shown on this figure on a probability scale of 0 to 1, with higher values indicating higher survival. The thinner lines here reflect 95% credible intervals. So as I previously mentioned, since sampling occurred in the spring and fall, these correlate to summer and winter survival. What we found is that survival varied quite a bit over time, ranging from about 40% to over 90%. However, there was not a consistent pattern seen here for either season. For example, some winters had lower survival, like 2021, while others were relatively high, like 2023. However, I do want to point out that there is a recent trend, a downward trend in survival estimates for the last two summers being 2024 and 2025. Further flow and temperature analysis is currently being done to investigate that why. I'm the one doing the analysis for that. So, building on the previous results, the next set of outputs evaluated how flow and fish size affected our recapture probabilities. Total length of fish had no detectable effect. However, flow showed a significant negative effect on recapture probabilities. As shown in this figure, flows during sampling could reach or exceed over 200 CFS, which is not good for sampling. It can bring our sampling efficiency down. So it was something we anticipated to see in our recapture probabilities. Oh, did I skip? We then used the model to examine the effect of fat levels, lipid content, fish size, and body condition, and the effect on survival probabilities in the summer versus the winter. Across all three variables, we found that they had a stronger positive effect on survival in the winter, indicated by the blue here, rather than those of the summer, indicated by the red. This suggests that as conditions change or energy reserves shift, these factors become more important during winter seasons. An interesting outcome from this model was body condition, BC here at the bottom. We found that fish in better body condition showed a strong negative effect on survival in the summer, but a positive effect in the winter. So at first glance, this may seem counterintuitive. However, one potential explanation is behavioral. So individuals in better body condition may exhibit higher activity levels or more aggressive foraging behaviors in the summer, and that may be having a negative effect on their survival in the summer. So bringing us back to where we started, let's quickly review my main objectives and my predictions. First, it was to determine whether survival probabilities of adult brown trout would differ between the summer and the winter. And second, to evaluate the extent, energy reserves, and body condition, what the difference would be between the summer and winter for that. My predictions were winter would show lower survival probabilities due to harsher conditions. And secondly, fish with greater energy reserves and better body condition would be more likely to survive in the summer and winter. And to summarize our current best model, what we found was that survival probabilities varied across time. Although we hypothesized that winter would have lower survival, this was not indicated in our results. Some winter periods had noticeably higher survival rates than others, and so we can't say we saw an exact seasonal trend. However, there is a recent downward trend in the last two summers, that being 2024 and 2025. As I mentioned, we are unsure of the why at this moment. Next, when analyzing covariate effects on recapture probabilities, Rome had a strong negative effect, which we would anticipate. So as flows increased, the likelihood of our recapture decreased, and this is more likely due to reduced sampling efficiency and capture efficiency. Then during the winter months, lipid content, body condition, and length became more evident and important towards brown trout survival. This is likely due to increased environmental stress and limited food availability. So this requires the fish to rely on more stored energy during those periods, which is more than likely why we saw that be more evident during that period. And finally, better body condition in fish during the winter corresponded to a positive effect on survival. However, this was the opposite in the summer. This could be indicating growth survival trade-offs, in which bolder, larger fish may be more active during the summer, trying to get resources. So it's having that negative trade-off with it on the survival probabilities. So my second hypothesis was slightly incorrect, since we did not see a positive effect of lipid content and body condition on survival during the summer months. So altogether, our findings show that both environmental factors and individual traits shape survival and recapture patterns in brown trout. This is particularly important to consider in high elevation flow altered systems, as they already are nutrient limited. So it's important to consider this. They are also strongly seasonal. And then this research shows that through the application of an open population model, further studies can evaluate survival of fisheries inhabiting environments that are challenging to sample. So let's say there's harsher winter conditions. This open population model can help with that. Or in our case, we had a dam operation and they have their own water release schedule, so they can make sampling difficult. And lastly, research analyzing survival of brown trout in flow altered mountain streams is limited. Therefore, this work is contributing to that gap. The response of aquatic species tends to be very environmentally, or tends to be context based on the environment the species is in. So we do need to increase more research to kind of come to a consensus of different environments and how aquatic species may respond, whether that's negative or positive. And then future direction, as I mentioned, temperature and flow data analysis for 2021 and 2025 is currently being done by me so that we can try to figure out if there is a why to our summer survival rates going down. And then the ranch will be continuing mark recapture data. Right now, this research is still pretty early. It's only 5 years worth of data, so that data set needs to be improved in the way that, like, let's say 10 years, that may improve survival estimates. So it'll be exciting to see what it looks like in a couple of years down the road. Yeah, and with that, I'd like to thank the BVR team. They're not here because they're in Fort Collins, and that's fair. But they've done a great job helping with field sampling despite the high flows and long days. Graduate students, they've helped me with analysis and writing, so that's been great. And then the Blue Valley Ranch, I'd like to thank them for sharing their data with me and funding this project. In addition to the Cutthroat chapter, it has been great help during my time as a master's student to have this funding. And also the Colorado Mountain Club Foundation has been an awesome sponsor. And with that, I'll take any questions or comments. Yes.
Blue Valley Ranch.
Sorry?
They let you fish at Blue Valley Ranch.
They do let me fish. Although I'm not a good fisher though. I don't fly fish, so yeah, I know, I'm so sorry. Yeah, so I mean West Coast, you know. So, but it's been pretty cool to go out there and just not even have to always fish, you know, electrofishing by itself is pretty awesome. Yes. No comment. Sorry. Yes. Oh. Okay.
Plane, a little bit back meter, and then looking at.
Yeah, it basically it's kind of like a microwave is the metaphor that's been used. It basically has a sensor that sends these waves, and then there is an inverse relationship between water and lipid content. So it's able to measure back what is water content in the tissue versus lipid content in that way. So it's basically using these waves. So it's pretty cool. Yes.
It's not basic, it's not a.
No. It's not invasive at all, which is pretty neat. Actually, a lot of aquaculture uses it for to test freshness. So there's different models for different types of uses. So it's pretty neat.
It's more like, scale.
Uh,
The thing about the body fat composition, stuff like that.
like if the scale thickness.
I'll stand on it.
Yeah.
It's
Oh.
one-
Oh yes, yeah. Yeah, kind of like that. Sorry, I was thinking like fish scales when you said that. So yeah, that's gotcha. Okay, gotcha. I know. Yeah, but yeah, it's like that. Any other questions? But yeah, what's next is me analyzing that water and temp data. I have a lot of writing to do after this, basically. Yeah. Cool.
Thank you, Helen.
Yes.
All right. I'd also like to thank Brendan for coming and tying for us. And he's got a table here with some things, and you have some cards there, right? Okay. Very good. All right. Thank you very much. And before we out the free tickets, this is the first time. All right. We have one. And Helen. And Helen's chauffeur. So we have three. All right.